Hey everyone, welcome back to English Inside Out. I'm Anna, and I'm really happy you're here with us today. If this is your first time listening, this podcast is all about real, natural English, the kind people actually use when they speak, not the kind that only lives in textbooks.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for pressing play today. Whether you're listening in the morning, on your way to work, or late at night trying to squeeze in some English practice, we're glad you're here. Today's episode is a fun one because we're talking about a word you probably already know, but maybe don't fully trust yet.
Exactly. Today we're talking about the verb get and its close friends got and getting. This is one of those words that looks simple, sounds simple, but somehow shows up everywhere in English.
Everywhere. You get messages, you get home, you get tired, you get excited, you get confused, and sometimes you just don't get it.
And if you're learning English, that can feel a little frustrating. Because you hear this word all the time, but no one really sits down and explains it in a calm, natural way.
So that's what we're doing today. No heavy grammar lesson, no long rules to memorize. Just a real conversation with real examples so you can start feeling more comfortable using get the way native speakers do.
So Mark, before we jump in, let's warm things up a bit. How did your day start today?
Honestly, not great. I got up later than usual, and that already put me in a bad mood. You know when you wake up and immediately feel like you're behind?
Oh yeah, I get that feeling. Once the morning starts badly, everything feels rushed.
Exactly. I got out of bed, got dressed really quickly, and realized I didn't have time to make breakfast. So I just grabbed my bag and left.
Did you at least get coffee?
Barely. I got a coffee on the way, but I was half asleep when I ordered it. By the time I actually sat down, I was already getting stressed about the day.
That's such a normal situation. And what's interesting is how naturally all those get forms came into the story.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. I wasn't trying to use get, it just happened.
And that's exactly how native speakers use it. We don't plan it, we don't think about the grammar, we just say it.
But when you're learning English, this word can feel confusing because it doesn't have just one meaning.
Right? Sometimes get means receive. Sometimes it means arrive. Sometimes it means become. And sometimes it means understand.
And today, we're going to slowly unpack those meanings. Not all at once, and not in a stressful way.
We'll start simple with the present form, get then move naturally into got for the past, and getting four things that are changing or happening right now.
By the end of this episode, our goal is for you to feel more confident saying things like, I got your message, or I'm getting tired, without stopping to translate in your head.
And even more important, we want you to notice this word when you hear it in movies, podcasts, or real conversations.
Because once you notice it, everything starts to make sense.
So let's slow down, relax, and start from the beginning.
Let's start with the most basic form of all.
Let's talk about get.
So, let's start with the present form. Get. This is the base form, and honestly, it's the one you'll hear the most in everyday English. When people say get is confusing, what they usually mean is that get does many jobs at the same time. But if you step back a little, there are a few core ideas that repeat again and again. One of the most common meanings is to receive something, and this is something you probably already use without realizing it. You get messages, you get emails, you get notifications on your phone all day long. When someone asks, "Did you get my message?" They're not being informal or lazy. They're just speaking naturally. In daily conversation, we almost never say, "Did you receive my message?" because that sounds formal, like an email from a company.
Exactly. And this idea of receiving doesn't only apply to messages. You can get a gift, get a call, get an invitation, or even get good news. For example, you might say, I get a call from my mom every Sunday, or I usually get a lot of emails at work. These sentences are simple, but they sound very real. And what's nice about get here is that it feels friendly. It feels human. When you say, I got your message, it sounds warm and personal. That's why English speakers love this verb so much. It fits naturally into everyday life.
Another very common meaning of get is to arrive somewhere. And this one is huge for daily conversations. We say things like, what time do you get home? Or, I usually get to work around 9. You'll notice that native speakers almost never say, "What time do you arrive home?" That sounds stiff and unnatural in casual speech.
Using get for arrival feels relaxed. You can get home, get to the office, get there early, or get here late. It works for almost any place, and you can easily add time to it, which makes it super practical when you're talking about your routine or your plans.
Yes, and this is such an important point for learners. If you want to sound more natural, start replacing arrive with get in conversations. For example, instead of saying, "I arrive at work at 8, try saying, "I get to work at 8. It immediately sounds more conversational. You can also use it in questions, like, "What time do you usually get home?" or "How long does it take to get there?" These are very common questions that people ask every day, and get fits perfectly in all of them.
Now, there's another meaning of get that learners often find confusing at first, but it's actually very simple once you see it in real life. And that meaning is to understand. When someone says, "I get it," they mean, "I understand." This is extremely common in spoken English. You might hear someone explain something, and then the other person says, "Oh, okay, I get it now." It's short, it's casual, and it sounds much more natural than saying, "I understand this now."
And you can also use it as a question. If you're explaining something, you can ask, "Do you get it?" That's a very friendly way to check if the other person understands you. It doesn't feel like a test. It feels like a normal conversation. You can even use it to show empathy. For example, "I get why you're tired," or "I get why that's frustrating." In these cases, get doesn't just mean understand. It means you understand how someone feels. And that's a really powerful way to connect with people in English.
So, just with the present form get, we already have a lot going on. You can use it to talk about receiving things, arriving places, and understanding ideas. And the key thing to remember is that all of these uses feel very natural and very spoken. You don't need to force this word into your English. The more you listen to real conversations, the more it will start to feel normal.
Exactly. And don't worry if it still feels a little strange right now. That's completely normal. What matters is that you start noticing get when you hear it and slowly try using it yourself in simple sentences. Because once you're comfortable with get in the present, moving on to got and getting becomes much easier.
And that's exactly where we're going next.
Now that we're comfortable with get in the present, let's move into the past. And this is where a lot of learners actually start to relax a bit, because the good news is that get has a very simple past form. No matter who you're talking about, I, you, he, she, we, they, the past form is always got. There's no change. You don't have to think too much. You just use got and keep going. And in real life, this form comes up constantly. We use it to talk about things that already happened. Things we received, places we arrived at, or moments when we finally understood something.
Exactly. And one of the most common ways we use got is when we talk about receiving something in the past. For example, you might say, "I got your message last night," or "I got an email from my boss this morning." These sentences are simple, but they sound very natural. And again, notice how different it feels from saying, "I received your message." That version isn't wrong, but it feels more formal, more distant. Got feels friendly and conversational. You can also use it with things like gifts or news. "I got a gift for my birthday," or "I got some good news today." These are the kinds of sentences people use every day without thinking about grammar at all.
Another very common use of got is when we talk about arriving somewhere in the past. You might say, "I got home late last night," or "We got to the restaurant just in time." And again, this is much more natural than saying "we arrived at the restaurant" in spoken English. Especially in casual situations, got is the default choice. You'll also hear questions like, "What time did you get home?" or "When did you get there?" These are extremely common and very useful questions to know.
There's also a really important and very natural use of got. When we talk about understanding something in the past, this is when you hear people say, "I got it," or "Oh, now I got it." This usually happens after some explanation. Maybe someone explains a rule, a joke, or a problem, and suddenly it makes sense. When that moment happens, people often say, "Oh, I got it now." That's a very real reaction in English. And just like with get in the present, this sounds much more relaxed than saying, "I understood it."
It's also worth mentioning a very common mistake here, especially for beginners. Sometimes learners say things like, "Yesterday I get a message." And while people will probably understand you, it's not quite right. When you're clearly talking about the past yesterday, last night, this morning, you almost always want got, not get. So, I got a message yesterday, or I got home late last night. This small change makes a big difference in how natural your English sounds.
And the good thing is, you don't need to overthink it. If the action is finished and it happened in the past, got is usually the right choice. You got a call. You got home. You got the idea. You got the news. Once you start hearing this pattern, it becomes automatic.
And that's really the goal here. Not perfection, but comfort. Feeling comfortable using got when you talk about your day, your messages, your plans, or your experiences. Because in real conversations, people use got all the time to tell short stories about what happened.
And now that we've covered get in the present and got in the past, there's one more form that shows up everywhere, especially when we talk about change.
Yes. Next, we're talking about getting.
So now let's talk about getting, because this form is incredibly common when English speakers talk about change, and this is one of the most useful parts of the verb get, especially for daily conversations. When we use getting, we're usually talking about something that is changing over time or something that is happening right now. It's not finished yet, it's in progress. And that idea alone can help you understand most uses of getting. For example, if I say, "I'm getting tired," it doesn't mean I'm already completely exhausted. It means the change is happening. I was fine before, but now I'm moving in the direction of being tired.
Exactly. And this is why getting is so common with feelings and physical states. We say things like, "I'm getting hungry," "I'm getting cold," or "I'm getting nervous." These are things that change little by little. You're not hungry, then you are. You're not nervous, then suddenly you are. Getting is perfect for describing that moment in between. You can also use it with emotions. For example, "I'm getting excited about the weekend," or "I'm getting frustrated with this app." These sentences sound very natural and very real.
Another really common use of getting is when we talk about situations changing, not just people. You might hear someone say, "It's getting late," or "It's getting dark outside." Again, the idea is movement. Time is moving forward. The situation is changing. These phrases are everywhere in spoken English, especially when people are making decisions. When someone says, "It's getting late," what they often really mean is, "We should probably leave soon."
Yes, and getting is also very common when we talk about long-term changes. For example, "I'm getting better at English," or "She's getting more confident at work." These changes don't happen in one day, they happen slowly, and using getting shows that progress is happening, even if it's not finished yet. This is a really positive way to talk about improvement, and it's something learners can use right away.
There's also a practical grammar pattern here that's very useful. We often use getting followed by an adjective. Getting tired, getting better, getting easier, getting worse. Once you learn a few adjectives, you can create a lot of natural sentences with this pattern.
And what's nice is that you don't need to think too much about it. If something is changing, getting usually works. You can even combine it with time or context. As the day goes on, "I'm getting more focused," or as winter comes, "It's getting colder." These kinds of sentences sound very fluent, even though the structure is actually quite simple.
One thing learners sometimes worry about is whether they should use getting or something more formal like becoming. And the truth is, in everyday conversation, getting is much more common. You might read becoming in books or formal writing, but in spoken English, getting is what people actually say.
And that's really the theme of this whole episode. We're not trying to teach perfect English, we're focusing on real English. The kind you hear in conversations, podcasts, and everyday life.
So now you've seen how get works in the present, how got works in the past, and how getting helps us talk about change and progress.
And the best part is, these three forms naturally work together,
Which brings us to the most important part.
using all of them naturally in a real conversation. You know what's interesting, Mark? Once you start paying attention, you realize how often get shows up in normal conversations. Like, just this morning, I got a message from a friend saying she's getting ready for a big job interview, and she was clearly getting nervous as the time got closer. And none of that felt planned. It's just how people naturally talk. You don't stop and think, oh, now I'll use get. It just happens.
Exactly. And I had a similar moment yesterday. I got home later than I expected, and by the time I finally sat down, I was already getting really tired. But at the same time, I was getting excited about today's recording, so it was kind of a mix of feelings. And that's a perfect example of how these forms work together. Past actions, current states, changes happening in real time, all connected through get.
And I think that's what learners need to hear more often. You don't need dozens of different verbs to express yourself clearly. One verb, like get, used well, can cover so many situations. You get information, you get places, you get ideas, and over time, you start getting more comfortable using it without overthinking.
That's such an important point. A lot of learners try to sound advanced by avoiding common verbs, but that can actually make their English sound less natural. Native speakers use simple verbs all the time, and get is one of the most powerful ones because it adapts to the situation.
And let's be honest, learning English can feel overwhelming at times. There's so much vocabulary, so many rules. But when you notice patterns like this, it starts getting easier. You realize that you don't need perfection to communicate well. You just need tools that work.
Exactly. And once you get used to these tools, something really nice happens. You stop translating in your head all the time. Instead of thinking, what's the correct verb here? You start thinking, what do I want to say? And the language follows.
And that's really the goal of English Inside Out. Helping people move from studying English to actually living in it.
And with that, I think we're ready to wrap things up. So before we finish today's episode, let's take a moment to simplify everything we talked about. We're not trying to turn get into something complicated. Quite the opposite.
If you think about it in real terms, get helps you talk about things that happen, things you receive, places you arrive at, and ideas you understand. Got lets you talk about all of that in the past. And getting lets you talk about change, the moments in between. Once you see it that way, it starts to feel a lot more manageable.
Exactly. And if you take just one thing from this episode, let it be this. Don't be afraid of get. It's not a basic verb in a bad way. It's a powerful verb in a very practical way. Pay attention to how often you hear it in movies, podcasts, and conversations. You'll start noticing sentences like, I got it, I'm getting better, or did you get home okay, everywhere. And the more you notice it, the easier it becomes to use it naturally yourself.
A really good exercise after this episode is to think about your own day and try to describe it using get. What did you get today? Where did you get to? How are you getting right now? You'll probably realize that you already know more than you think.
And remember, progress in English doesn't happen overnight. You don't suddenly get fluent, you get a little better every day. And over time, you start getting more confident, more relaxed, and more natural. That's the journey.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow English Inside Out and share it with someone who's also learning English.
And if you have questions or topics you want us to talk about next, let us know. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in the next episode.